Okay, so that should be recording. Milena, can you confirm that you're seeing a record symbol?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
brilliant. Okay,
recording.
brilliant. Thank you. So, we have a Q&A session at the end. So do hold tight to your questions in the first part of the session, and we will address them at the end. Um, can I ask if you can hold on to questions in the chat as well up until the end, just so that we don't have to backtrack and look through the chat, um, uh, just to kind of catch questions that we might have missed. We will address general questions in the Q&A. So if you've got any queries relating to personal cases that you don't think will be any use to anyone else in the room, do speak to your community neighborhood senior officer or manager on any specific cases relating to your project. If you need any support during the session, let one of the facilitators know in the chat. Keep muted, please, during the presentation or while others are speaking during the Q&A. Why are we here today? So to understand what you need to do as part of the People Power Places submission of monitoring and evaluation forms, a guide through by Milena of good practice of monitoring, documenting things of what happens during your project life cycle, and answering questions at the end to make sure you feel confident with the process. Don't worry too much about the timings. It all depends on how quickly we get through presentations and how short the Q&As are. So generally, I'm just gonna run through a couple of slides initially, then Milena will take over after that. We'll have some questions after that, and then some next steps of up and coming clinics. And then I think with this numbers, we should be finishing a lot earlier this evening as well. So things that should have taken place so far, again, this is, I'm sure all of you have done all of this so far, but there are still some outstanding grant agreements that we're waiting for. So if that's one of you, please speak to your senior officer or manager and get those returned as soon as possible. If you've got any other documents that you need to hand in as well, please speak to your senior officers and hand them in as soon as you can. If you're using a third-party banker like Compost, you just need to get your consent form signed as well. And if you're being set up as a new supplier as well, your senior officer or manager will provide guidance and information for you to register a new account to receive your grant as well. So these are the initial steps to get you going. So do get these documents in as soon as you can. So what are the types of documentation you'll be expected to submit during your project cycle? So if you look at this particular table, this is lifted directly off your grant agreement. So there should be something exactly like this in your grant agreement. So, and it gives you a rough guideline on when things happen, but I've highlighted the dates on the left-hand side in yellow because that's not going to apply to every single one of you. The timelines vary from project to project, but the initial phase is obviously they're getting people set up, getting people the first payment. So hopefully that should be happening January, February, maybe even March. But we want to get that going as soon as possible. So what happens is you'll get your initial 50% advance payment. You don't need to provide any documentation apart from all the stuff at the beginning, like your grant agreements and so forth. And any other evidence that additional conditions have been met as well. So I think that each project has specific items that you may need to provide so that the first 50% of your grant is released as well. So I think some people need to provide safeguarding policies, risk assessments, those type of things as well. Again, it said July 2024, but that can vary quite dramatically. I mean, some people can finish their project in 4 months or 5 months. Some people will take the full year. So again, don't worry too much about the left-hand side. So what happens after the first 50% of your payment, you will spend that 50%. Make sure to keeping all the receipts and invoices. And what you do, you will submit your monitoring form phase 1. And I will go through these on in the next few slides. But once you submitted your monitoring form phase 1, which highlights all your expenditures for the first 50% of your grant, and all the receipts add up, and you've completed the form in full, then the next 25% will be released after that submission of the form. And then you go off and you spend the next 25%, and then you do the exactly same thing. You submit monitoring form phase 2, with all the receipts and invoices for the previous 25% of your spend. Once you've submitted that phase 2 monitoring form, you will get your last 25% of your payment. So that will be your full payments in 3 installments. And then you've got to spend that 25%, that last 25% as well. Once you've spent your last 25% and you've had your final, some projects have final events or final showcase events or opening days, things like that. So once your project is complete, you'll be expected to complete an evaluation form as your final part of your agreement, grant agreement, for receiving the grant. So that could be again, it could be any time during the year, but we're saying December 2024 is the final month that this could happen. So that's your phases of your project. So that's 3 payments, and then 3 documents to submit: monitoring form phase 1, monitoring form phase 2, and your final evaluation form. So we'll go on to the next slide. We'll just have a quick chat about the monitoring forms phase 1 and 2. So I'm going to run through the actual form itself in a minute, but just things to be mindful of while we're running through that form before I come off of this is in section where it says project beneficiaries. We don't need to know personal information of people such as names, date of births, addresses, etc. You can collect numbers that attended or have engaged in your project, and some generic demographic information. So I'll show you in a bit. On the evaluation form, there's like a breakdown of what you can use to collect demographic information, such as gender, age range, ethnic origin, and if they consider themselves to have a disability. But don't collect anything that will identify who those individuals are, as mentioned above in the previous point. You will need to provide receipts for all declared spends that you're showing on your monitoring forms as well. So really important to keep all your receipts, doesn't matter how much they are, of the grant submitting the monitoring form and evaluation form. We encourage you to take pictures of before and after, and all the bits in between too. So please do submit all pictures relating to your project to your senior officer. There might be some times when we might say, this might look great as publicity. Could we might want to publish some pictures, in which case we might have to go back and ask for consent forms for people in the pictures as well. So just bear that in mind. So what I'm going to do is just going to stop sharing this particular section, and I'm going to start sharing the actual monitoring form. Just give me one. Okay, go. Okay, so let me see, just to increase the size on this. I hope you can see that. So this is, you might recognize this. This is the your grant agreement. So this is just a template of the initial grant agreement that you would have been sent. It's got all the bits at the beginning about your offer, and you need to sign all your terms and conditions. But if you scroll down, you will see your documentation at the bottom. So there you go, Annex B. So that's your first monitoring form, phase one. So if I just read the bits, it says, please attach images before and after images, receipts, and pro forma invoices when submitting this form. Please note that we publish some of the information provided on new co-create. So just remember that, yeah, this is kind of transparent information that needs to be provided to members of the public. So, people can ask for specific information on grants that were given out to residents. So it's really important that you're transparent and clear on the spends on your project. The information will be shared may be shared with working groups as well, or used in reports on the outcomes of People Power Places program. So we will actually look at what you're putting in here, because we need to do an evaluation at the end of the whole program in January to March 2025. So we will evaluate the whole cycle and how projects did overall. And we're going to be going back to these monitoring forms and evaluation forms, and we're going to be extracting data from that so that we can use it as the overall evaluation of the program. So it's really important that we get some really good data from these forms as well. So initially you got your bits about the application, the project, the total grant awarded, a summary of the funded project. So on your application form, initial application form, you would have said, my project addresses these local priorities. And then what it's asking for is how you've addressed those priorities so far today. I mean, you might not have, if you haven't, put that down as well, because this is phase one of the monitoring form. So you might not even have gotten your, started properly in anyway. You might just be getting the infrastructure ready. So just write down exactly what's happened so far. Project beneficiary. So how this might have you included people, or how people have been engaged. So number of participants and any demographic data that you might have collected. So how many people have participated so far? So how many residents that you might have engaged with? How many volunteers have you involved so far? So people that might have helped you out with the project. Then it goes on to about timescales and risks. So what milestones that need to be achieved over the next few months? So it's asking you, what's your plan for the next few months? Are there any risks, and how are you going to mitigate those risks? Will you be able to allocate and spend the overall grant within the agreed timeline? So it's basically asking you to think about risks. We'll be having a project clinic about contingency plans as well in March. I think it's March the 5th. So we'll come on to that later on, but that's something there to help you out with this particular type of question as well. Support for your project. Do you require any further support from your community neighborhood team and the working group to complete the next phase of project? Just jot down what support you're going to need before you submit this to your senior officers. Safeguarding as well. So if your project involves supervision, care, or significant direct contact with children and vulnerable adults, please outline how safeguarding measures have been implemented. So this is how your sort of your analysis of risk for safeguarding and how you're kind of put mitigating measures in place as well. And then it goes on to your expenditure as well. So some people might have match funding or other funding for this project. So first you put how much money your first 50% will be. So say you got £10,000 in total, your first payment would have been 50%. So you put £5,000 here. If you've got another 2,000 from another source of funding, put 2,000 there, and then you list all your expenditure and make sure that the expenditure is related to your People Powered Places grant installment one. We want to see how you've spent your first 50% of the People Powered Places grant. You can continue lines by adding more lines if you wish as well here. Declaration is signed, print, position, date, and then it moves on to monitoring phase 2. So while we're onto this, we'll go onto this as well. Same sort of format, same question, summary on how the priority has been assessed, timescales and risks about the next few months, support for your project. So it's exactly the same. We've left out the part about the project beneficiaries on monitoring form 2, because that's going to be coming on the evaluation form later on. So we're hoping that you collect all the information and put it onto the last evaluation form. So we've left that particular part out. So really, it's not a lot on the second form, just your name, what priorities you've addressed, timescales and risks, support if you need any support, and then you list that on your spends. So this would have been the next 25% of your grant. Yeah. So for example, if your total allocated fund was 10,000, you would have received 5,000. And then you would have then received, after handing in the phase 1 form, you would have received the next 25, so that would be 2.5 grand you would have received. Once you've spent your 2.5 grand, you would then fill out this form, put in where your spends are for that £2,500, sign, date, print your name, and send that back to the senior officers. Everything matches up with your receipts. You'll receive your final 25%. So those are the monitoring forms. I will go back to the presentation. Just give me a sec. So the evaluation form. So this is a mandatory requirement as part of the grant agreement. It's really important. I mean, you would have received your last, your payment. And then what we're asking from you is after you spend that last payment is for you to fill out this evaluation form and send it back to us. Things to be mindful of before I start running through that form is do not collect people's personal information, identify your information as stated in the previous slide. Use the demographic information on the form as a template to collect your data. So don't sort of make up your own kind of table of demographic information you want to collect, because what we're trying to do is keep it consistent on how people collect data as well, so that we've got a better way of evaluating it at the end. There's some additional sections to evaluate your outcome, challenges, and feedback and recommendations. So be as thorough as you can in this particular part of the form. You will need to provide receipts as usual for all declared spend when submitting the evaluation form. Now, this isn't on any of the forms at the moment, but we are asking you if you can also monitor and document if you've had to work with any other council departments during your project cycle as well. So if you've interacted, we might not know what you do aside from interacting with us as community neighbourhood teams. But if you are working closely with other council departments or you've got some sort of networking going on, it'll be interesting for us to gather that data as well. So how you're connected with other departments in the council as well. Please note that down as well, if you can, separately or on the actual monitoring form as well, and exactly what kind of interactions you've got with these other departments in the council as well. So I'm going to start sharing the evaluation form. Second. Where were we? So this is the evaluation form section. It starts off the same. So please attach before and after images, receipts, invoices. So after all the bits, the usual bits at the beginning, the next question is a new one. It says about your outputs of the funded project. So it says, please describe the activities and or installations that have taken place. So what has been the result of your project? What actually has happened at the end as an output? So describe what the results were from your project. What did you end up doing in here? Again, it's asking about how you've addressed those local priorities as well that you initially set out to address. And then project beneficiaries. So here it says, please indicate the number of participants. Again, we need this data and any demographic data that you've collected about the participants using the table below. So how many people have participated in total? Enter the number in here. How many volunteers have been involved so far? Enter the number in here. And then it's going on to the demographic information. So when I said earlier on about using this a specific template, if you're going to use it, just use this when you're asking people questions, if you're collecting demographic information. So people who are coming to your events or your workshops, and you're getting feedback from them, just use it like the way it's set out here, basically, just so that everyone is using the same template. So we asked the gender, the age range, their background, and if they consider themselves to have disability. So as a minimum, that's the type of questions we're asking at the moment. Then we move on to outcomes of the funded project. So what are the main outcomes of the project? How is it made a difference to your local community? So again, enter as much detail as you can. So testimonials from people, who you've spoken to, what kind of impact it's made locally. Yeah, if you could describe that in this section here. So what were the positive changes to community neighborhood? Again, if different from the question above, enter detail in here as well. It asks about your challenges that you might have had throughout the project life cycle. So what challenges have you faced with this project and have you overcome them? Were there any proposed objectives that were not met? So is there anything that you weren't able to do for whatever reason? And just outline those in here. And then feedback and recommendations. So what are the main highlights of the People Power Places program and what are the recommendations for improvements that could be made for future cycles? So those are the additional questions we would like at the evaluation, and they're really important questions for us to take back and have our own evaluation process. We then ask you to conduct your last 25% expenditure as well. Itemization of expenditure in here as well, as usual, and then declare, sign, print, name, position, and date. So that's the evaluation form. I'm going to stop sharing the slides. Go back to these. So on top of that, if you can make a note of the additional departments that you are in touch with the council as well, that'd be really useful information for us. So I think that's now Melena's turn.
Yeah. Perfect. So what I'm going to be talking a bit about is the importance of monitoring, of evaluation, and also some examples of how you can collect that information. So as you can see, this slide is all about what are both of these things and why does it matter. So monitoring is the routine, systematic collection and recording of data about a project, and that allows you to kind of check and monitor its progress. And evaluation is when we use the monitoring and other data that's collected to make decisions about the project or organization. So by collecting both of these, we can understand the impacts of the projects that you run and also the impacts of people-powered places as a whole-scale project. And it allows us to understand a lot of different things. So we can understand a lot more about the difference that your activities make and also who benefits from them. We can also celebrate the successes of your project. So for instance, if you're able to collect data that shows that 1,000 people have attended your project in total, we can celebrate that. Whilst if we didn't collect that information, we wouldn't know. We can learn about what works and how to improve the project cycle. So with the People Powered Places project, with each round, it's quite iterative. So they're learning based off of what can be done to improve it, and the data that you collect would allow us to know that. And it also will allow us to identify unmet needs. So if there seems to be particular kind of areas of project types or particular demographics of people who we see aren't being represented or aren't being able to have the same outcomes as everyone else, we can use the data to understand what that is and figure out how we can meet those needs for either those people or those project types. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is about how to embed evaluation and monitoring into the work that you're doing with your projects. So as we discussed at the start of the call, part of what we're here to do is understand the submission of monitoring and evaluation forms, but also kind of know a bit more about good practice. So to let you know, good evaluations and good monitoring of data is kind of built into a project from the start. And that's why we're here today. And it allows us to kind of monitor over time the impact that the project or the activity has had on people. And it's important for us to capture where people are at the start of the project, and that allows us to measure any impact that the project has. Next slide, please. So there is some information here about the kind of information that you should be collecting as part of your role. Obviously, Chris has just gone through the monitoring and the evaluation form, and that includes some demographic information, which allows us to understand the types of people who have been attending your projects. So kind of looking at gender, age, ethnic origin, and if someone considers themselves to have a disability. For those questions, as Chris mentioned, the standard way that they will be reviewed is already in those documents. So if you are wanting to ask that information to anyone else, please use those questions as they are, because that allows for easy comparison of the data. And when you're thinking a bit about like the evaluation of your projects and how you want to kind of monitor your impact, it's really important to think about what is most useful for you to understand, and what are the aims of your projects, and therefore, you know, what is the data that you may potentially want to get so that you can see how well your project worked. So I've kind of given a quick example on the slide. So say, for instance, if there was a project which is about improving social connections in our local neighborhood, you may want to ask people before they join the project, throughout, and then also at the end, how often they feel lonely. And also then that allows you to have an opportunity to see how things have changed through the interaction and usage of your project. Next slide, please. So also just to say, there are a range of different ways that you can collect this information. Obviously in the evaluation and monitoring form, we had some quantitative measures. So quantitative data is all about kind of collecting what is happening. You know, if, for instance, everyone on this call right now, we asked people who was happy and who wasn't happy, we could say, for instance, 70% of people here are happy. But it isn't the only way that we can collect data, and a great way to also do it is to use qualitative data, and that's all about understanding why something is happening. So again, like with if we were to use this call as another example, we may be able to say 70% of people are happy right now, but we may want to have some questions or a focus group to understand what are the things that are driving people's happiness or unhappiness, and that allows us to build a much bigger picture about what people's current experiences are, it could be about their motivations for joining the project, how the project has supported them throughout the entire life cycle of the project, and then thinking a bit more about like what could be done to further improve the project. So on the screen and also in the presentation, which I think will be shared with you, we have a range of different ways that you can also collect data. So it goes from things, such as like surveys and kind of like focus groups, to also using things that are a bit more interactive and participatory. So things such as photography is a great way to either allow people to take photographs of what's important for them or for us to take photographs of what's happening. Maps can be used if we're looking at a project about a local area so that people can kind of pinpoint where they like, what they don't like, different kind of areas and different kind of experiences there. We can use things such as graffiti walls, which isn't people doing graffiti, but it is people putting a lot of their feedback on a wall and kind of building up this picture of the experience of people being a part of the project, but also the experiences of them and their reasons and motivations for joining the project. There's also things such as postcards, which are a great way to really get a really short snapshot of how someone feels about something. So you could give someone an A5 piece of paper such as this, and they could just write down a couple notes that they have, and that can be a great way of data collection. And then if we just go to the next slide. Also, as part of the Building a Fairer Newham corporate plan, there are 8 pillars that develop the Newham outcomes framework. And with this, if you can see, there's pillar 1, which is about the measures of success will be the health, happiness and well-being of our residents. Pillar 2 is the council will ensure every resident under 25 is safe, happy and cared for with positive activity to secure their long-term employment. Pillar 3 is the council will take action so that all residents are supported and enabled to access work and other opportunities in the local economy, etc., etc. And for each of these pillars, we have data that is used to back it up. And we also often have questions that come from our resident survey, which answer these, which allow us to understand the proportion of people who are being able to be supported with these outcomes. And what we can also do is share those questions with you if you do wish to use any of those questions. And then you can also compare the figures that you get to also the figures in the resident survey and other data sources. Next slide, please. And then just finally, an important thing to talk about is consent. Obviously, we've talked a lot about a variety of different ways that you can capture information, but it is really important to ensure that consent is asked for everything. So this slide is all about when taking pictures or videos. Obviously, they're a great way to kind of show the levels of engagement that you have with your activities. They're also a great way to show, the kind of progress that's made within your projects. However, it's really important that at the beginning of any photos or videos that you take that include people, you have to consult them about it and you have to let them know how the photos could be used and how they could be shared. You should also get written consent. So if you develop, I think Chris mentioned that there are forms that are available that you should ask everyone to sign before taking any pictures of your events or anything that you do regarding your people-powered places. It's especially important if you're talking to anyone who is under the age of 16, or if you're having pictures that include children, you need to also get parental or carer consent before taking a photo or video. As is discussed on the slide, there's a few things that you have to do. So you have to make people aware that a photo or video is being taken, explain to them what it's going to be used for and how it could be used in the future. So as Chris mentioned, it may be used for advertisement or promotion of people-powered places. Therefore, we need to ensure that residents know that that's how it could be used. We need to ask for people's consent, as I said, and ask them to sign it. If people don't consent, that's fine. You just need to ensure that any pictures that are taken don't include those people. You should also explain to people that they also have the opportunity to withdraw consent if they change their mind. And that would obviously mean that any pictures that you did take that do include that person can't be used going forward and also should be deleted. But also it's important to note to people that, you know, once it has been published, it's very difficult to recall a picture. So it's just ensuring that everyone has all of that information up front and therefore is able to make an informed decision about whether or not they want to be in any photos or videos. And then the next slide, please. And yeah, so this is about any kind of consent that you need to get when getting quantitative or qualitative feedback. So this is primarily thinking about if you're doing a questionnaire or if you're doing a kind of like formalized interview or focus group as part of your data collection. So before all of those, you also need to get consent. So with that, again, it's a similar kind of process of stating who you are, the purpose of this, and also how the data will be used. You need to ensure that data will be either kept anonymous or confidential, depending on what the kind of process is and what your data processing policies are. And you also, again, need to remind people that they can withdraw consent when they want, and what those steps are, and what that means with their data once that has been, if they do decide to withdraw consent. As said, you have to make it very clear before engaging with people about this. So, for instance, if you wanted to do a survey of people who attended a particular event to kind of see what their thoughts are and their feelings and how things have changed, it's good to have a question that asks if people do consent to take part. Well, you have to include a question at the start of it, asking if people consent to taking part in the survey. If they say no, either kind of, you know, say to them, that's completely fine. We then won't be asking you the follow-up questions. If you're doing an online survey, just you need to ensure that they then don't answer any questions. And yeah, it's just to re-emphasize, it is really important to ensure that you do have informed consent. A key way to do that, again, is if you do have any kind of photos, if you get a photo consent form developed, and just have those printed out and have all of those accessible, so that at whatever events you have, if people are going to take pictures, just at the start of it, ask people to sign them or put their hands up to say if they don't consent, so that you know who to not take pictures with. And similarly, for any kind of surveys or formalized kind of like qualitative interviews, again, you have to be very clear at the very start that you do need consent. And if people don't consent, that's completely fine, but then you won't be able to do any data collection with them. So that takes us to the questions section of the presentation. Based off of everything that we've talked about so far, does anyone have any questions?
Can I just ask, if you are taking sort of sensitive photos, like the back of people, no faces, not anonymized, hands and feet, do you still need consent?
I think as best practice, I would. It would be, I think also it's just a nice kind of thing to do to just ensure that people do know what's going on. So yeah, so I would do that. Yeah. Okay. Dean, I can see you have your hand up.
Yeah, could I make a specific request? Could you please ask the Custom House regeneration team not to take pictures without consent? Because we've had a problem in the past with the regeneration team. They pop up at our events. They've been taking photographs of potentially vulnerable women and children. They've passed them on to a third party, and they've been published and appeared in the public domain. And we still struggle to get them to understand you cannot do this. Now, I'm not going to
Okay,
know individuals.
we'll take that separately.
you
Yeah,
could
if you
do
can
that,
email
that'd be
me, Dean, separately on that case.
Right.
I can take that case separately. Someone else, yeah. Any questions with people, power, places, valuations, monitoring forms? I think it's fair to say that, you know, general members of the public can take pictures on the streets, whatever, you know, without having to go and ask people to fill out forms. But because we're doing this as part of a grant process through the council, you know, you're conducting a project, community project, using publicly funded money. This is the reason why we have to be quite stringent with gaining consent, particularly with photos, with younger people, vulnerable people, and so forth. So there is a photo consent form template that your neighbourhood teams will be able to provide you if you wish to start taking photos and already, which is, I mean, I guess you want the before pictures and after pictures. So that is available for you as a template if you wish to do, you know, to get that from your neighbourhood teams. Is there any questions specifically on the monitoring forms? Is that quite clear? And there's a lot of information to take in, but it's really important. Yeah,
Chris,
go on.
you might have already said it because I joined a little bit late. I
Sure,
struggled
yeah.
with the link. But are there particular months that that we need to fill in the monitoring forms? Like, you know.
Yeah, no, yeah. So I did go when I went through the timelines. I mentioned it. If it's put on your grant agreement, there's a little bit about the timeline of when you might receive your next payment, and then when you need to hand in your monetary form. That varies from project to project. Some projects will be done and dusted in 3-4 months, just depending on the type of project. Some projects will take the full year, so the timeline would obviously be stretched out in that scenario. So don't worry about the dates about when those monitoring forms. What we want you to do is finish by December. That's the main aim. Whatever happens in between can vary in terms of timelines. Yeah. And just to add as well, I mean, I'm really glad you guys, you know, everyone's attended here. But it's really important. This is really important part of the People Power Places program. We've allowed ourselves 3 months after this particular phase is finished. So December is when we want all our projects to finish, and we've collected all the evaluation forms, and we've given ourselves January to March next year to do a full evaluation of the whole program. There was an evaluation done on the 21-22 cycle as well. So, and there was a full report produced on that, and it's quite an extensive report. And this is what drives us to be able to get further funding for further cycles going forward as well. So this is the reason why we're really kind of pushing this point to every one of you about it's really important that you collect the data so that we can show that things are really working. You know, your projects are making an impact. In the reasons why you've applied for these, the reasons why you want to address the priorities that you said you want to address. It's all making an impact on the ground, and we need to evidence this as a collective. And for that, we need you to be able to fill in those forms quite accurately with numbers, demographic information to say we've positively impacted this group of people. You know, we've managed to do workshops for X amount of people, so forth and so forth. So it's really important that we collect data, and a lot of the programs these days are really dependent on how well things have been done before. So we need to evidence that we're doing. You know, you're doing a great job with delivering your projects. So really appreciate if you can, you know, do fill those 3 forms out as much as detailed as possible. So on that note, we have any other questions? No?
Krish, can I
Yeah.
just add just to say that apart from the paperwork of with the monitoring forms and evaluation forms, our working group members, along with ourselves, senior officers, the community neighborhood team, will also be popping by to visit projects. And in response to Hannah's earlier question, don't worry, we will send reminders when your monitoring forms are due. So we will keep you on track.
Yeah, thanks, Merdine. I forgot about that. So there will be someone, monitoring visits happening with senior officers or managers and working group members as well, just to pop by and make sure you're all okay. Dean, yes, you have a question.
Yes. With the different forms you showed, have you got any templates or examples that you could share with people? Because I know some people, we've been fortunate enough to have Merdine supporting us through the citizens' assemblies, the community assemblies, and now the PPP. So we've got quite a lot of experience, and Merdine has spent how many hours supporting us. But for newcomers, it can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. I'll have a look. I'm not sure if there was one done a couple of years ago. I'll have a look. If there is one, I'll try and get one out. But I would say in the first instance, ask for help if you're not sure about the forms from your local senior officer or manager. I'll have a dig around, see if I can find anything that's already been done as an example as well. I do remember some example forms being created before, so I'll have a check.
Yeah, because we get a lot of resident individuals and groups coming to us because we've been involved for so long, and we try and support them. For example, we shared our business plan with other groups because they can then just overtype it, and we downloaded that from a government website, so we know it's the right way to do the business plan. So I'd say to any of the people on the call here, do ask other people who are doing projects. Don't struggle on your own, which is what we did at the beginning.
Yeah, and this is why some of these project clinics are quite useful as well, because you get to meet other project leads as well. You can privately message each other if you wish to exchange information, if you want to work together on certain things as well. So do take that opportunity during these project clinics to network as well. So if there's not any other questions, I'm just going to share the remaining slides. Give me a sec. Oh, have I missed anything in the chat? Is there anything in the chat? Oh, thanks, Dean. Okay. Oh, brilliant. You found the evaluation from previous years. Brilliant. So yeah, Dean has put a link in there as well about the actual evaluation of the community assemblies we used to call this program. Brilliant. Okay, so hopefully you found information useful today. So here's the schedule so far with dates. So apologies of the one last week that was cancelled. We've moved that now to the 29th of Feb. So that's next week, Thursday. So that's about documenting your project, communications, marketing, and promoting your projects. Do attend that because that's quite an important one as well. I mean, they're all important, but I'm biased when I promote these, but that one is really important because you want to be able to reach out to as many people as possible and shout about your projects and get as many people engaged as possible. So that's, again, that links into this project clinic about monitoring and evaluation. So next week's clinic is about how you maximize your engagement, and then obviously today is how you monitor that engagement. So really useful one next week. Please do attend. We've set a date now for the one about contingency planning. So that's Compost. Caroline from Compost will help us out on that one on the 5th of March. I think that's a Tuesday. So do attend that one as well. And then we've got some more planned April onwards. Dates haven't been confirmed yet. We will keep you posted on those as they come in. So yeah, so we'll pass these on. I've got all your contacts now, so I can inform you directly. It doesn't have to be through your neighborhood team. Please note though, some of these might be subject to change. So anything that hasn't got an actual date on it, it's just dependent on whether we can get the support to deliver those as well. So that's what's coming up. Again, if you've got any further questions, get in touch with your senior officer or manager. We've got we're planning in the next set of events, in-person events, which will be taking place in June. We're setting the dates. We'll be publishing those as soon as possible. We'll share those dates out to you as soon as we can, just so that you got plenty of notice on those. And that's it really. So good luck with your projects. I'm as always, please provide us with feedback on how we did. I'm going to just quickly grab the link for the feedback form and put that in the chat. Just give me a second. So just pasted that into the chat. So this is just about this particular clinic and how we did in those clinics. So if there's nothing else, Hannah, are you talking to us or somebody else? I think Hannah's talking to somebody else. Hannah, are you talking to us or to somebody else? Okay, no, she's not talking. But yeah, so if there's nothing else, then we can come to a close half an hour early. So thank you very much for everyone who's attended, and hopefully we'll see you on the Thursday the 29th next week.
29.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Recording.